She should have kept walking. She almost did. The desert wind carried dust and heat and the particular kind of silence that only exists where survival has replaced everything else. But the moment she stepped around that corner in the open-air market of Swakopmund, the air shifted. A Korean man in an immaculate charcoal suit stood where no one like him should exist, surrounded by men who watched exits, not people. His eyes, calm, obsidian, devastating, found her before she found him. She looked through him, past him, as if he were nothing. And something in that ruthless indifference cracked a door inside him that had never, in 34 years of calculated power, been opened. He erased her family's debt before she knew his name. And now she's standing in a room realizing the man who freed her never planned to let her go. Was it rescue? Or was it the most beautiful trap ever built? Welcome back to Elira Stories. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and turn on post notifications. Your support means everything. Now, enjoy the story. Studies show that people become more attracted to those who seem unimpressed by them. It's called the scarcity effect. In this story, Dantego's indifference does more to capture Null than any deliberate pursuit could. Have you ever been drawn to someone who seemed completely unbothered by you? Drop your answer below. The Namib Desert does not forgive weakness. Dantego had learned that the same way she learned everything, through her body first, her mind second, and her heart last, if at all. She was 26 years old and had the posture of a woman twice her age, not from exhaustion, but from the kind of discipline that forms when softness becomes a luxury no one around you can afford. She was beautiful in the way the desert itself was beautiful, vast, severe, sculpted by forces that did not ask permission. Her frame was full and commanding, hips wide and certain, her figure the kind that drew stares she had long since trained herself not to acknowledge. She moved through the crowded morning market in Swakopmund with the efficiency of someone running on a clock no one else could see. The debt had been with her family for 11 years. Her father had borrowed from the wrong man during a drought season, and that wrong man had multiplied what was owed in ways that laughed at logic. Dantego had taken over managing it at 19, after her father's health collapsed. She had not asked for the responsibility. She had simply looked around and realized no one else was going to carry it. That morning, she was buying dried fish and a sack of ground maize, calculating grams against cost with the precision of someone who had balanced impossible equations for years. The market was loud. The air tasted of salt from the Atlantic coast nearby and of something older beneath it, iron, heat, the particular weight of a place where the land has outlasted every civilization that tried to claim it. She turned a corner between stalls and nearly walked into a wall that turned out to be a man. She stepped back, looked up. He was Korean, which was unusual enough here. But it wasn't his nationality that caught her attention, it was the stillness of him. He stood in the middle of a market that buzzed and shouted and smelled of life, and he was completely, unnervingly still. Broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, dressed in a suit that had no business being worn in a desert morning market. The fabric was fine enough to make the surrounding stalls look like a different world entirely. 3 men flanked him at careful distances, not close enough to crowd him, close enough to kill for him. Dantego took all of this in within 2 seconds. Then she moved around him. Not rude, not curious, simply rerouted, the way water finds a path around stone. She didn't meet his eyes, didn't slow her pace, picked up her basket again and continued toward the fish stall as if the entire moment had never happened. Behind her, the man called Null, Jang Null, though no one in this country knew that name yet, stood very still in the space she had left behind. His associate, a broad man named Hyun, leaned slightly toward him. "Sir?" Null didn't answer for a moment. His eyes tracked her retreating figure, the deliberate stride, the way her shoulders carried something invisible and heavy. The absolute absence of any awareness that she had just walked past one of the most dangerous men currently operating on the African continent. "Who is she?" he said. Hyun followed his gaze. "Unknown. Local. Find out." It was not a request. Null had not come to Namibia for anything personal. He had come because the southern distribution corridor his organization used through Walvis Bay had developed a problem, specifically. A port official who had begun skimming more than his agreed percentage and had made the catastrophic mistake of believing that distance from Seoul made him untouchable. The problem had been resolved within 48 hours of Noel's arrival, quietly, with the kind of efficiency his organization was known for. He was meant to fly out the following morning. He did not fly out. That evening, in the cool of his rented suite overlooking the South Atlantic, Hyun placed a single sheet of paper on the table beside his untouched dinner. Dantaego's name at the top. Below it, a brief, clean summary. 26. Eldest daughter. Father, Komatsu, retired fisherman, chronically ill. The debt, owed to a local lender named Tobias Awa. The original sum had been modest. What it had grown into was not. Noel read the page once. Set it face down. He sat with the ocean for a long time. He told himself he was simply curious. That the girl who had looked through him like he was made of air had simply been an anomaly worth cataloging. He had spent 15 years in rooms where everyone looked at him with something: fear, calculation, desire, ambition. Even those who tried to hide it gave themselves away in the microtremors around their eyes. She had given him nothing. Not defiance. Not avoidance. Simply nothing. He hadn't existed to her. And for a reason he was not yet willing to examine honestly, that had moved something in him with the force of a tectonic shift. He made a call before dawn. Tobias Awa's debt was purchased, quietly, through 3 layers of intermediary, before the sun came up. The fulsome years of accumulated interest included, transferred in a single, clean transaction. In the paperwork that reached Awa's office by morning courier, the debt was listed as satisfied in full. The family's name, cleared. No message was sent to Dantaego. No explanation offered. The transaction left no fingerprints that would ever reach her. Noel flew to Johannesburg. He told himself the matter was closed. 3 weeks later, Dantaego stood outside the door of Tobias Awa's collection office, a low, iron-roofed building on the eastern edge of Swakopmund that she had been walking into with payments since she was 19 years old, and read a notice she did not understand. Outstanding balance, 0. Account status, closed. She read it a second time, then a third. She went inside. Sat across from Awa's junior clerk, a nervous young man who could not meet her eyes and shuffled papers with unnecessary intensity. She asked him to explain. He told her, carefully, that the debt had been satisfied by an external party. He could not provide details of the purchasing party. It was handled through a financial intermediary. All she needed to know was that the account was clear. By who? Dantaego asked. I cannot say. Cannot or will not? The clerk looked pained. Cannot. She left the office. Stood in the street with the Atlantic wind pulling at the hem of her dress, and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time, the specific, fragile dizziness of a weight being lifted from somewhere you had forgotten wasn't supposed to carry it. She didn't cry. She sat on a low concrete wall and looked at the road and breathed. Then she went home and told her father. Her father, Komatsu, who had lived with the guilt of that debt like a stone lodged behind his sternum for 11 years, covered his face with his hands and wept in a way that made Dantaego have to leave the room so he wouldn't see her doing the same. She spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out who would do that. Who had that kind of money? Who would spend it on a family they didn't know? She ran through every person she had ever helped, every favor she had ever done, every distant relative with any resource at all. She came up with nothing. It unsettled her in a way she couldn't name. 2 months passed. Dantaego took a position at a mid-range hotel on the Swakopmund waterfront. Not glamorous work, but steady, and the manager, a quiet man named Solomon, trusted her with more responsibility than her title suggested. She organized the supply chain, managed vendor relationships, handled disputes with the calm directness of someone who had been defusing crises since adolescence. She was good at it. She was good at most things she put her mind to, which had never once translated into ease, because ease requires margin, and margin requires resources, and resources were the one thing she had always been rationing. But the debt was gone. The margin had appeared, mysteriously, like water from stone. She hadn't stopped thinking about it. She was carrying a clipboard through the hotel's rear courtyard, a sun-bleached space with flowering aloe and a view of the ocean, when she heard voices from the private terrace reserved for longer-term guests. A voice, specifically. Low, unhurried, speaking Korean into a phone. A voice that managed to carry authority without raising itself even slightly. Dantego stopped. She didn't know Korean. She couldn't have said why the voice reached past her ribs and pressed somewhere it shouldn't have. She told herself it was the cadence. That she was simply startled. She moved toward the terrace access to check which suite had booked the outdoor space. Standard procedure. Part of her job. Nothing more. She rounded the terrace's half wall. The man in the charcoal suit looked up from his phone. Dantego went very still. It was him. The market. The stillness. The eyes that had, in 2 seconds, seen more of her than most people managed in 2 years. He lowered his phone slowly. His expression didn't change. But something in his posture did, a barely perceptible shift, like a predator that has been waiting patiently and has just heard a sound it recognizes. "You work here," he said. Not a question. "Yes." Her voice was level. She held up the clipboard with the precise energy of someone who has decided to treat this encounter as entirely professional. "I need to confirm your booking for the terrace space." "Which suite?" He watched her for a moment, that stillness again, that absolute economy of movement, as if motion were a resource he rationed carefully. 412, he said. She noted it. Nodded once. Turned to leave. "You were at the market," he said. 2 months ago. Near Tobias Street. Dantego paused. Her back was to him. She turned slowly. "I don't remember," she said. It was a lie. She had a photographer's memory and remembered him perfectly, the suit, the men, the impossible stillness. Noel looked at her for a long moment. Then one corner of his mouth moved in something that wasn't quite a smile, but occupied the same space. "You don't remember," he repeated. "Is there anything else you need for the terrace?" she said. "No. Enjoy your afternoon." She walked away, kept her pace measured, kept her spine straight, kept her breathing even until she was through the rear door and into the cool of the service corridor, where she stopped and pressed her back against the wall and stood there for 10 full seconds, not entirely sure what had just happened inside her chest. She told herself it was nothing. She was practical to a fault, and she had not survived 11 years of impossible arithmetic by giving weight to feelings she couldn't account for. He was a guest. A wealthy one. Korean. The kind of man who traveled with people who watched exits. She filed him under irrelevant and returned to work. He ate dinner on the terrace that night. She was not assigned to that section. She noticed him anyway. He sat alone. The 3 men she'd seen at the market were nowhere visible, though she suspected they were simply better hidden. He ate without looking at his phone, without reading, without the performative busyness that most people use to justify existing in public alone. He simply sat and looked at the ocean and existed with the kind of self-containment that most people spent their whole lives trying to fake. Solomon, the hotel manager, stopped beside her in the doorway. "Suite 412, Solomon said quietly. "Check him in personally from now on. He's asked for a consistent point of contact." Dantego looked at him. "Who is he?" Solomon lowered his voice. "Jang. Korean. He has an import business with a regional office in Johannesburg. He's extended his stay indefinitely. That suite costs more per week than we earn in a month." Solomon looked at her with the expression of someone trying to be subtle and not entirely succeeding. "Be professional. Be available. Be whatever he needs." Dantego said nothing, but something cold moved through her, not fear. Something more specific. The particular wariness of a woman who has learned that things that arrive without explanation tend to cost more than the thing they replaced. The debt was gone. She still didn't know who paid it. And now this man, this still, watchful, too expensive man, had requested her specifically. She turned back toward the terrace. Through the glass, Noel sat with his back to her, facing the ocean. He couldn't have seen her. He didn't turn. But she had the absolute, irrational, bone-level certainty that he already knew she was there. The following week moved in fragments she would later struggle to reassemble in the right order. Noel was, by every observable measure, a model guest. He was quiet, Punctual. Never unreasonable. He tipped generously without spectacle. He made no demands that exceeded what any affluent traveler might reasonably expect. He used the terrace in the mornings, the dining room in the evenings, and conducted his business, whatever that business actually was, behind the closed door of Fort Welve, with the kind of discretion that left no trace. He also had, with the precision of someone who had planned it carefully, arranged his world so that Dantego was in it regularly. She brought his morning coffee personally, Solomon's instruction. She confirmed his dinner reservations. She handled a question about a local vehicle hire and found herself sitting across from him in the lobby while he reviewed the options she'd pulled together, his forearms resting on the table between them, his presence filling the space like something physical. He was unfailingly courteous. He never touched her, never said anything she could point to, but he watched her. Not in the way that made her skin crawl. She knew that feeling well enough to recognize it. This was different. This was the watching of someone who has decided something with certainty and is now simply waiting for the world to catch up to that decision. It made her furious. She couldn't have said exactly why. Possibly because she couldn't locate a reason to object to anything specific he had done, and Dantego was a woman who needed clean lines. Problems you could name. Debts you could calculate. She didn't know what to do with something she could feel but not file. 10 days into his extended stay, a man named Ade arrived at the hotel. He was Namibian Nigerian, built like a former athlete, with the kind of smile that was designed to close deals and had, by his own account, closed many. He worked in regional tourism development and was staying for a conference. He noticed Dantego within 3 hours of check-in. He was charming. He was uncomplicated. He asked her questions that were about her, actually about her, not about what she could provide, and when she answered carefully, he listened in a way that made her realize how rarely anyone did. She was professional. She was not rude. She did not encourage anything. But she laughed at something he said on his second day, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded, and she didn't notice until a half-second too late that Noel was passing through the lobby behind her and had gone absolutely, completely still. She noticed then. She didn't look at him. But she felt the stillness from 6 meters away with the accuracy of a compass needle. That evening, Hyun, who she had by now identified as Noel's closest associate, appeared at the front desk with a request to extend their suite reservation and to confirm that Ms. Dantego would continue as the primary point of contact. She said yes. She did not ask why. She thought about the debt again that night. 2 days later, Ade asked if she would join him for coffee on her break. She was considering it, truly considering it, because he was kind and uncomplicated, and those were 2 things she had been starved of, when Noel appeared in the corridor behind her. He didn't interrupt. He simply appeared, as he had a way of doing, as if the space had quietly reorganized itself around his presence. "I need to discuss the vehicle for Thursday," he said to her. His voice was entirely neutral. She looked at Ade. "Excuse me." Ade smiled, unoffended, and walked away. Dantego turned to Noel. "What about the vehicle?" He handed her a folded note. Inside was a perfectly reasonable set of adjustments to the booking she'd made. Timing. Pickup point. Nothing that could not have been communicated through a 5-line message. She looked at the note. Looked at him. This couldn't be emailed? "I wanted to discuss it personally." A long pause. "There is nothing here that requires a discussion," she said, precisely. His jaw moved slightly. Not tension exactly. Something more controlled than tension. "You're right," he said. She waited. He said nothing else. She folded the note and put it in her pocket and walked away, and the entire hallway felt like it had dropped several degrees. Later, she heard from a kitchen staff member that the tourist, Ade, had received a quiet visit from hotel management suggesting his conference accommodations might be better suited at a partner property better aligned to his event's needs. The transfer had been arranged, the manager had said, at no additional cost. Dantego sat with that information for a long time. Then she went to Fort Welve and knocked. Noel opened the door. He was in a simpler form of himself, no suit jacket, shirt untucked, the careful armor of public presentation slightly loosened. It changed him in a way she hadn't expected. made something human visible that the stillness usually hid. Ade didn't ask to transfer suites, Dantego said. Noel said nothing. He told me this morning, before he left, that he'd been encouraged to move to a different property. She kept her voice even. She was not a woman who performed emotion for effect. When she was direct, it was because she meant it. I want to know if that came from you. Another pause. Then, yes. She absorbed that. Why? He looked at her for a long moment. Then he opened the door wider. Come inside. No. There's something I should tell you. You can tell me here. He leaned against the door frame. His eyes moved over her face with that unhurried precision, the same way he looked at the ocean, like he was memorizing something he intended to keep. The debt, he said, quietly. Your family's. Tobias Ewa. The air in the corridor went very still. That was you, she said. He didn't look away. Yes. She walked. She did it without thinking, just turned and moved down the corridor with the mechanical precision of someone whose body has decided to act while the mind catches up. She went through the rear exit, across the sun-hammered staff parking area, past the aloe garden, to the low wall at the edge of the property where the land dropped away toward the beach and the Atlantic stretched out, gray-green and enormous and indifferent to everything. She sat on the wall. The wind came off the water and pushed against her face. 11 years. Her father's shame. The way she had done sums at 19 that a teenager should never have had to do. The years she had not applied for the university bursary because the money needed to go elsewhere. The version of herself she had laid aside, quietly, without being asked to, because someone had to carry it and she was there. And this man, this stranger with still eyes and a charcoal suit, had erased all of it with a phone call. Without asking. Without telling her. Without making it a trade. She sat with the wind for a long time. When she heard footsteps behind her, she didn't turn. Noel sat beside her on the wall. Not close. At a distance that was respectful and somehow, because of that respect, worse. Why? She said. Because I could. That's not an answer. He was quiet for a moment. Below them, the ocean moved through its own enormous logic. You walked past me like I was made of air, he said. Not bitterly. Almost with wonder. In 11 years of doing what I do, no one has ever done that. I needed to know who you were. So you bought my family's debt. I freed your family from a debt you were never meant to carry. Without asking me. Would you have accepted it if I'd asked? A pause. She already knew the answer to that. So did he. That's not the point, she said. No, he agreed. It isn't. She turned to look at him for the first time since he had sat down. Up close, without the professional distance she had maintained all week, he looked different. Still contained. Still formidably composed. But there were faint lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent in controlled tension, and something in his jaw that she was increasingly certain was not coldness, but its opposite feeling, held so tightly it had learned to look like nothing. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing. People who spend money like that on strangers want something. I know how that looks, he said quietly. I know what I am. What I've done. What kind of world I come from. He looked at the ocean. But what I did for your family, I want nothing back for that. It's done. It doesn't belong to anything between us unless you want it to. And what is between us? He turned to look at her again. That depends on you. She did not fall. Not quickly. Not easily. Not in the way the stories go where proximity alone dissolves resistance. Dantego had not survived what she had survived by giving herself to anything she couldn't verify, and Noel, whatever he was not verifiable. He was composed of layers she could feel but not see, connected to structures she sensed but couldn't name. She kept her professional distance. She maintained her clarity. But she began to notice things. He left a local craft worker's contact card on the desk during one of their booking meetings, not pointed out, not mentioned, just present. She looked up the name later and discovered it was her cousin Adia, who carved wooden figures and had been trying for 2 years to get into a tourist-facing market. Within a week of Dantego quietly following up on that card, Adia had 3 new stockists. She noticed that the hotel's vendor contract, The one with the unreliable maize supplier that had caused her 3 months of logistical headaches was quietly renegotiated after Knowles spent an afternoon in Solomon's office discussing, ostensibly, regional supply chain economics. She noticed that when she worked late, there was always a car available to take her home, arranged through Solomon with no explanation. She noticed all of it, filed none of it away as coincidence. And one evening, when she was leaving through the rear exit and found 2 men she didn't know blocking the alley, not aggressive yet, but positioned wrong, she felt, before she heard or saw anything, the weight of someone approaching from behind her. Noel's voice was quiet. "She works here. You're in the wrong place." The men left. Quickly. Dantego stood in the alley for a moment before turning around. He was watching the men's retreating backs. When he looked at her, his expression was locked down tight in the way it always was, but his hands, she noticed, were not entirely still. "Who were they?" she asked. "No one who'll come back." "Noel." She used his name for the first time. It stopped him. "Who are they?" A pause. "There are people who don't appreciate my presence here," he said carefully. Occasionally, that irritation finds the wrong outlet. She understood, then, in the way that she understood most things completely and immediately, without wanting to. His world was not clean. The men who watched exits were not decorative. The power he moved through the world with was not the power of a man who ran a respectable import business. She should have walked away. She looked at his hands, which had gone still again, and thought about the debt her father had wept over, and about Adia's new stockists, and about the car that appeared every late evening. She didn't walk away. Quick pause. If this story has you hooked, tap like and drop your thoughts below. Now, back to the story. The crisis came on a Tuesday, in the form of a phone call that Dantego took at 6 in the morning. Her father had collapsed. Not the slow decline she had learned to brace herself against, but suddenly, mid-sentence at the breakfast table, and now he was in the regional hospital, and the attending physician needed a family member present. She arrived at the hospital still in yesterday's work clothes, and spent 4 hours in a plastic chair outside her father's room learning, incrementally, that the collapse had been cardiac, and that the treatment he needed was available, but the cost was not. She did the math. She always did the math. The number that came up was not possible. She was sitting in the corridor with her phone in her lap and the number written on the back of a paper given to her by the billing office when she heard him. Noel came through the main hospital doors at a pace that was controlled, but that she recognized, by now, as his version of urgency. Hyun was behind him. He crossed the corridor and stopped in front of her and looked at her with an expression that had shed most of its careful engineering. "How did you know?" she said. "I have someone at the hotel." When you left suddenly, he stopped, looked at the paper in her hands. He didn't take it, didn't touch it, just looked at her. "Tell me what you need." "You can't keep." Dantego. Her name in his mouth was not loud, but it stopped everything. "Tell me what you need." She looked up at him. The corridor was fluorescent and antiseptic and nobody's idea of a moment. But his eyes were on her face with the full, undivided weight of everything she had spent weeks trying to classify, and she was suddenly, overwhelmingly tired of the walls she built by habit. "He needs cardiac surgery," she said. "And I can't. It's handled. You can't just. It's handled." His voice had gone very quiet. "Your father will have what he needs. Today. Do not argue with me about this." She held his gaze. "Who are you?" she said, and she did not mean it as a professional question. He crouched to her level, this enormous, contained man, so that their eyes were level and the distance between them was the smallest it had ever been. She could see, close up, all the things he kept controlled, the tension at the line of his jaw, the careful steadiness of his breathing, the thing in his eyes that was not coldness and never had been. "Someone who doesn't intend to let anything happen to you," he said, "or to anyone who belongs to you." The weeks that followed rewrote her. Not rapidly. Not cleanly. She was not a woman who rewrote easily. She was granite under pressure, and she had her reasons, and she held to them even as the reasons grew harder to justify. But Noel was patient in the way that only people of extraordinary will can be patient. Not passive, not resigned, but simply settled in their certainty the way a mountain is settled in its certainty about being a mountain. Her father's surgery was successful. She sat in the recovery room holding Komatsu's hand and felt the specific grief of someone being given back something they had already mourned. And when she stepped outside and found Noel sitting in the corridor with a cup of cold coffee he'd forgotten to drink, she stood in the doorway for a long time before walking toward him. She sat beside him. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything either. After a while, in the fluorescent silence of a hospital corridor at midnight, she leaned her head against his shoulder, and he went very still, not the stillness of withdrawal, but of a man who is afraid that any movement will end something he cannot afford to lose. He did not move. His hand, eventually, came to rest over hers. Careful. Asking nothing. The truth about Noel's world arrived the following month, not through his admission, but through a visit. Two men from a rival organization who had tracked him to Namibia with the specific intention of delivering a message about his continued presence on the continent. The message was not verbal. Dantego was at the hotel when it happened. She heard nothing until Solomon came to find her, white-faced, and said there had been an incident at the East Side warehouse Noel used for Solomon did not finish the sentence. She was at the location in 20 minutes. Noel was standing outside a vehicle, a cut along his jaw that had bled more than it warranted, and a look in his eyes that she recognized now, from up close, as controlled fury. He saw her coming and something moved in his face, relief and alarm simultaneously. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You're bleeding," she said. "Dantego." "Sit down." He sat. She cleaned the cut with the first aid kit she'd grabbed from Solomon's office, her hands steady, her face close to his, working without speaking. He watched her work with an expression she didn't examine directly because it would have made her hands unsteady. When she finished, she sat back and looked at him. "Tell me what you are," she said. "Completely." A long pause. Then he told her. Not everything. She understood, later, that some things he would carry alone always. But he told her enough: the organization, the reach, the things done in its name, including in the years before he had looked for any exit he couldn't find. He told her about the corridor he had been trying, quietly, for years to walk toward a life with less blood in it, though the past had a long memory. He told her he had not been looking for anything in Swakopmund. He told her she had changed the mathematics of what he wanted his life to mean. She sat with all of it. She was a woman who needed clean lines, and this was not clean. This would never be clean in the way she was accustomed to demanding. But she looked at his face and thought about the debt, and her father breathing in a recovery room, and a car appearing every late evening, and his hand over hers in a hospital corridor. "I'm not afraid of what you are," she said. "I'm afraid of what you might decide I'm not worth protecting one day." He moved before she finished the sentence, crossed the distance between them, and took her face in his hands, carefully, the way you hold something you know is irreplaceable, and when he spoke, it was quietly but with the absolute, unequivocal clarity of a man who has decided something down to the bone. "There is no version of this," he said, "where I decide that. What happened in the seconds after that, the closeness, the held breath, the years of wall finally giving way, belongs to them. What the camera fades from is not the moment. The moment is everything. The fade is simply privacy." She woke before him. She lay still and looked at the ceiling of Fort Welve and felt something she had no vocabulary for because she had never let herself have it before, the specific, terrifying lightness of having given someone everything and found them still there. She began, quietly, to get up. His arm came around her waist. "No," he said, into the dark. She stopped. "I thought," she started. "No," he said again, pulling her back, gently, with the certainty of a man who has thought about this exact moment and will not negotiate it. "Stay." She stayed. The danger did not end. It slowed and changed shape and tested them in forms she couldn't have predicted. There was a night 3 months later when Dantego was taken, not randomly, but deliberately, by people who knew exactly who she was to Noel and intended to use that. She was held for 11 hours in a location outside the city while Noel, who had gone briefly to Johannesburg for 2 days, came back to Namibia and proceeded to dismantle, with systematic and unrelenting completeness, every layer of protection his enemies believed they had. He found her at 2 in the morning. She was unharmed physically, and when she saw him come through the door, she did not cry, because she was Dantego, but her knees failed her briefly, and he caught her before she reached the floor and held her in a way that communicated, without any words, what those 11 hours had cost him. Later, she asked him if he was going to tell her everything was fine. "No," he said, "but I'm going to make sure you never go through that again." She believed him. Not blindly. Not without knowing what it cost him to be believed. But because a woman who has spent her life calculating real weight knows, when something is real, down to the gram. The ending came not with spectacle, but with the kind of simplicity that felt, after everything, like a different kind of extraordinary. Noel's exit from the organization, the long, quiet, years-in-the-making exit, was formally completed 18 months after that first market morning. It was not celebrated. It simply closed, like a ledger line drawn under an account that had finally been resolved. He bought a house on the Swakopmund coast, where the desert met the Atlantic and the silence was wide enough to hold everything they had accumulated between them. He proposed at the edge of the water, in the early morning, with no one watching, holding a ring that her cousin Adia had helped him find, a local jeweler, family referred, because he paid attention to the things she cared about. She said yes before he finished asking. Their wedding was small. Her father walked her across a courtyard filled with the people she had spent her life protecting. Noel stood at the end of the aisle, and for the first time in anyone's memory, the stillness left him, replaced by something open and unguarded that the people who knew him would talk about long after. The sun over the Namib, that afternoon, was the same sun that had hammered down on the market on the morning she had walked past him like air. She had never planned to look twice. She was glad, more than she had words for, that he had. Months later, when the doctor confirmed what she already suspected, the particular tenderness, the way mornings had changed, she sat with the window open and the Atlantic air coming through and told Noel in the kitchen, quietly, before the day began. He set down the cup he was holding, turned to look at her, and for the length of a breath, the man who had spent 15 years being unreadable was completely, entirely readable. He crossed the room and held her like the whole desert was outside and none of it could reach them. The Namib, as always, stretched endlessly. But the silence it held now was different. It held them. It held what they had built. And it held, just beginning, just taking its first shape against the enormous quiet, the sound of something new. If this story pulled you in, comment your thoughts and stay subscribed, there's more coming.